Hey guys, it's Maddie or Books with Maddie, and today I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite genres of all time, historical fiction. Historical fiction has always been one of my favorite genres. I really love the aspect of being able to kind of dive into a historical time period. You get to learn a lot about it without it being in like a formal setting, which I think is something really cool about historical fiction. And something that's like an extra quality that you get when you're reading a book that is set in a historical period. So I'm going to share some of my favorite historical fiction reads that you should read too because a lot of them are like my favorite books of all time. And although I don't always get the chance to read historical fiction as much as I would like to, I still think that my all-time favorite books are always historical fiction. So the first one I'm going to talk about you've probably heard of. It's quite popular. It's The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This is a historical fiction. It's set, obviously it's historical fiction. It's set partially in like current day and partially in like old Hollywood, like the 50s. It follows the story of Evelyn Hugo and her kind of journey through Hollywood and the 7 husbands that she went through, but it's told from the perspective of Monique, a writer who is kind of new to the scene. She's kind of really fresh. So when Evelyn Hugo approaches her and wants Monique to tell her story, people are kind of skeptical about why and what kind of connection they have. I gave it 5 stars. I read it last July for the reading rush, and I'm really glad I did because it was a really quick read for me, so it was perfect for the reading rush. It's such a fascinating tale, and Taylor Jenkins Reid is one of my favorite authors of all time. I think this is by far her best work, and I would highly recommend it. Okay, my next recommendation is Stalking Jack Thurber by Kerri Maniscalco. This is actually part of a 4-book series. This is the first book, but I would recommend reading the whole series. It follows a girl called Audrey Rose and her journey of being a assistant to her uncle, who is a medical examiner, I think. He does like autopsies, and in this time period, a girl's place is not examining dead bodies and stuff like that, but that is her true passion, and it has some really great feministic qualities which are probably not accurate to the time period exactly, but it's so good, and there's a really lovely romance that just really tops it off. It's honestly one of the most like heartwarming books. I know it's about Jack the Ripper, but it's just so pure and wholesome, and I love it. Okay, my next recommendation is The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. This one is a little bit more of a heavier read than the last 2, and it's definitely more historical based. So it's about the city of Troy being under siege of the Greek army. So it's about the girls who were captured from one of Troy's neighboring kingdoms. I don't know if it doesn't say it in the synopsis. I can't remember where it was that she was captured from, that the girls were captured from, but the Greeks basically invade this neighboring city of Troy and capture the women and then kill all of the men. And it's the story of, I don't know exactly how to say her name, Briseis or Briseis, her being kind of the favorite to Achilles, and what she has to go through in these camps, along with some of what the other women have to go through in the camps. It's a really heart-wrenching tale, and super compelling. Listen to the audiobook as I read along, and I thought that the narrator, they well captured the emotions of the characters. I really enjoyed this book. I don't think I gave it 5 stars. I think I gave it 3 just because there were a couple problems that I had with it, but if you're interested in Greece and the Trojan War and some really heavy stories that deserve to be told, then I would definitely recommend this book. Okay, the next one is a little bit lighter. It's called Suitors and Sabotage by Anstey, and as you can see, this cover is just gorgeous. This I read at the beginning of last year when I was just realizing how much I loved historical fiction, and this is just a really light, cute romance, and it's basically the story of a girl named Imogen, and she's kind of expected to marry this one man who she finds like incredibly boring, but she's really fascinated and has a really nice friendship with his brother. It's kind of the tale of like a forbidden kind of romance, but I don't think I gave it 5 stars either. I think I gave it 4, but it was just really cute. If you're looking for just like a light historical fiction, I would definitely recommend Suitors and Sabotage. Okay, I don't know how much this classifies as historical fiction, but my next recommendation is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. It's fiction technically, and it was written in a historical time period, so I am classifying it as historical fiction, but I just want to recommend a classic because Jane Eyre needs so much more love on BookTube. It's one of my favorite classics of all time. I read it for my women in literature class, and it was just, it blew me away, and I think that everyone should read it because it's just so moving. It's very, very moving. If you don't know, it's about the story of a girl named Jane Eyre who lives with her aunt and her cousins who are very abusive towards her. Her parents are both dead, and so she's stuck in this very, very toxic situation. She escapes it by going to school, an all-girls school, but she finds a similar kind of abuse there. And so it's kind of a story of her finding her way in the world, making a path for herself, and facing some of the consequences that comes with sex, beauty, class, and discrimination that happens on accounts of those things. And so I think it's super relevant, even though it takes place so long ago. I think it's still a really relevant novel, and I'm super glad that I had to read it for my women literature class because I was very, very impacted by it. Okay, next is one of my favorite books of all time. It is called Blood, Water, Paint by Joy McCullough. This book is one of my favorite books of all time, as I said. It was my second favorite book that I read last year. It's told nearly entirely in verse, and it's the story of Artemisia Gentileschi. She was a Italian painter who painted for her father, so her father would take her paintings and claim they were his own. And it's this heartbreaking tale of her mother's death and kind of her dealing with the grief of her mother's death. And there's the parts that aren't verse are like this, so they're like actual stories, but they're from the perspective of when her mother was alive, but the rest of it is in verse. And I think that verse was the perfect form for this book to take. It was extremely moving. It talks about her getting raped and her deciding not to back down from that rape and to stand up for herself. And Artemisia Gentileschi was actually a real painter in Italy, and you can look up her work. It's amazing. I have a sticker of one of her paintings. It's a picture of Judith cutting off a man's head, and it's on my laptop. But this book was phenomenal. I cried. I felt intense emotions towards this book, and it's just like criminally underrated. I know that there are some people have some problems with the historical accuracy, but I think that the story that it tells and the weight that it carries in today's society kind of outweighs that need for historical accuracy. The message that it tells is so important to today's society, and I think that if we kind of take it out of the historical context, we can even get more from it than we do by just focusing on what's on the page. You know what I mean? And so obviously the historical credibility is very important in historical novels, but I think in this case there's much more to this than just looking at it for the history. And I think that's something that I really love to see in historical fiction, being able to take it out of context and place it in today's context in today's society. Okay, the last book, on a much lighter note, was my favorite book of last year. I actually have never talked about this book on even Bookstagram because I just don't know how to express my feelings for it in a way that I think would do it justice. So, the book is Lovely War by Julie Berry. This book was my favorite book of last year. I'd already said that, but I have to say it again. There are so many things that I like about this book that it's even difficult to know where to start. There are many different perspectives in this book, and it's told from the perspectives of Greek gods. Aphrodite, Hephaestus, Apollo, Hades, and Ares. But it's a love story taking place in World War I, but the narrative of the gods to each other takes place in World War II. So they're telling the story of Hazel and James to each other. It's a bit difficult to explain. And that point is, I think, I want to make sure. It's been a while since I read this book. So, in 1942. I don't know when World War II started, but I think it was close to 1942. It follows not only Hazel and James, but two other characters named Aubrey and Colette. I fell to tears reading this book. I fell apart. I broke. This book both broke me and healed me. If you are looking for Greek mythology, romance, historical fiction, but not like overwhelming historical fiction, some like just heartbreakingly good content. I don't know why this is another book that is just criminally it is criminal activity how few people have read this book. It is just absurd to me because I would die for this book. I would die for it. There is very little I wouldn't do for this book. I love it with my whole heart, and I have yet to find a book that I love more. This may be my favorite book of all time, because there's none. This book is it. This is where it's at, people. Hop on the trains. I have never cried harder while reading a book. And the Greek god aspect of it, I love mythology. I think a lot of people love mythology, which is why you should read this book. Anyway. Those are all my recommendations. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it so much. I really hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you pick up some of the books that I recommended. I hope it helped you maybe start into the historical fiction genre. All of the books that I talked about will also be linked in the description below if you want to check them out, as well as my Goodreads, Twitter, and Bookstagram. If you have any historical recommendations for me, please leave them in the comments below. I'm always looking for new historical fictions to read. I have so many on my TBR, but I'm always looking for more. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon. Were very, very well, I wonder what that looks like. It's not that pretty. But so Aphrodite, Hephaestus, Ares, Hades, Apollo. My favorite part about this book is that, okay, can you see? It looks like no. Anyway.